We have a big family tonight. We're going to take a look at the Rosaceae. So let's get started. Here's a picture of a few species up there in the upper left corner. We see some prairie smoke, GM triflorum. We can see some potentilla. Now it's Drymocalus, arguta, prairie cinquefoil, serviceberry up in the upper right, and Rosa satigera, the climbing prairie rose in the lower right. So this is a pretty big family, 3,000 species worldwide. You can see that there's about 700 species in North America. Iowa has roughly 77 species in the Rosaceae, but that's using Eilers and Rosa. And that number is a bit low because in Eilers and Rosa, there's only about, I don't know, 10 or so rubus. And because of the work that Mark Rudeleckner has been doing with rubus, we know now that rubus in Iowa is up to about 38. So probably almost 100 species of Rosaceae in Iowa. It is a worldwide family, occurs all around the globe, but we are living in the spot for Rosaceae. It's the most diverse in the north temperate portions. So what I want to do is just kind of go over the characteristics, of course, that make a plant a rose real quick, and then we'll do a key that helps key out the genera, and then we'll take a look at a group of species, identify a handful of species. This is, again, this is too big a family to try and cover all of these species, so I picked mainly just some of the herbaceous species or species in the rose family that I thought would be most helpful. So sexuality, it says there, plants are bisexual, flowers are usually always perfect. There's all kinds of growth forms. The Rosaceae, of course, has quite a few woody plants. In fact, when we look at the key for genera, we'll see that there's about 5 or 6 genera that are shrubs and trees. Leaves, simple or compound, and so I've put in some illustrations here to help get those points across. So we can have simple leaves like the one here on the very left, which again is just a single blade attached by the petiole to the stem, or 2 kinds of compound leaves, pinnately compound, which has leaflets that are opposite each other on a rachis, arranged at different points there. And then of course, palmate, the leaflets are all attached at a common point. The leaves are always alternate, and they're usually serrate, meaning that here's what alternate leaf attachment looks like. And here's what serrate means, of course, sawtooth edges. They're usually always stipulate too, at least the compound leaves. The compound leaves are often stipulate. And here's a compound leaf in the rose family with stipules. So stipules are little green bracts. They're usually somewhat greenish. And a bract is just something that's a really scaled down, very small leaf-like structure. They're always paired, and they always occur at the base of the leaf where the leaf attaches to the stem. Now, I know that if some of you are kind of new to this, and one difficulty that always comes up is how do you know whether you're looking at a compound or a simple leaf? It's always the bud. You always have to pay attention to where the bud is. Buds always occur, almost always occur at least. Sometimes they're so small you can't see them, but they're usually still there. There's buds that are always occurring in the axils of leaves. So where the leaf again meets the stem, that's the leaf axil. So for example, on this compound leaf, since there are no buds out here anyplace, that means then that these are not leaves. We have to go to where we see the bud, and we see the bud down here, and that tells us this is where the leaf starts. And so that means since we have the leaf blade divided into segments, then we have a compound leaf. Petioles can be present like you see here, petiole here, or they may not be present. They may have a sessile leaf. So if the petiole is not there, the leaf is attached to the stem right at the base of the blade. Usually compound leaves do have a petiole. It's the simple leaves that are usually, at least have a possibility of being sessile. Some of these Rosaceae have glands. Now, I don't have any examples of those, I don't think tonight, but some glands that occur on the petiole. Where this is most often found are in the prunus, the plums and cherries. And we're not going to focus on the woody stuff very much. I think there might be a picture, I'll have to see. I might have a picture of a petiole with some glands on it, just so you can see what that looks like. Thorns or prickles are sometimes present. So again, little modifications of branches. That's what a thorn is, a branch that's become modified to be protective. Or prickles, that's the modification of a hair. Either of those are often present in at least some groups. What really stands out for the Rosaceae that really unites them pretty strongly is this idea of a Hypenthium. The Hypantheum are well developed and always present in Rosaceae. There can be all kinds of different shapes, but there's always a Hypantheum. And this diagram shows what Hypantheum looks like in a diagram. Hypantheum is basically a cup-like structure when you see it in 3 dimensions. Here it's cut in long sections, so we're just seeing, you know, half of it basically. But it's a cup-like structure. You can kind of get a little bit better idea in this picture right here of a prunus. It's formed from, there's differences of opinion a little bit, but a common idea is that it's basically formed, at least in part, from the lower parts of the stamens, the lower parts of the petals, and the lower parts of the sepals. You can see that does make sense, because quite often those 3 flower parts are attached at the rim of the Hypantheum. You can see that happening over here too. So the perianth, which again is the sepals and the petals, there's usually 5 of them, sometimes 4. Perianth, when we say separate, that means that the sepals are not, at least the sepals as we see them, the apparent sepals right here, those sepals are not fused together. Now, again, the Hypantheum means that the sepals could be in part fused to the lower parts of the petals and the lower parts of the filaments. Quite a few species in Rosaceae have what's called an Epicalyx, and I'll show you some good pictures of that a little bit later. But that just means that there's some additional sepal-like bracts that sit below the sepal. So normally a flower just has 4 different whorls of flower parts: the sepals, the petals, the stamens, and the carpals. Carpals are often fused together to form a pistil. But again, in some species, there's additional bracts that sit below the calyx, below the sepals, and so that's called an epicalyx. Petals are usually 5, and again, as far as what we can see of the petals, again, separate. They are arranged in a radial fashion so that they kind of, again, all come out from a center. That's what radial means, rather than bilateral. The gynoecium androecium refers to the male part of the flower, which of course is the stamens, and it's pretty simple. It's just 10 to many, and some species there are lots of stamens, lots and lots of them. And again, aside from possibly being fused to the lower parts of petals and sepals, the filaments themselves are not fused to any other flower part. They're not fused to other stamens. The carpals, which are the female part of the flower again, and we're looking at a couple of carpals that are fused together right here in this diagram. They can be distinct, meaning that they're not fused. There's many carpals, but they're all separate carpals. And the term for that then would be a simple pistil. But they can also be fused together. They can be connate. Connate means that like parts are fused together. So carpals are fused to carpals. And when that happens, it's usually 2 to 5 carpals that are fused together. Again, not unlike what we kind of see here for 2 of them. And sometimes there can just be one carpal. The fruits are very diverse in the Rosaceae. I have some pictures of a few of them right here. Since there's the possibility of the gynecium, again, the female part of the flower, to be composed of separate carpals, each of those carpals has an ovary, so the ovaries are all separate. Well, what a fruit is, of course, it's the ovary that matures after a seed is formed. The seed forms inside of it, and the fruit develops around that seed and encloses it. So when you have lots of separate, again, distinct means separate, not fused, carpals, then the type of fruit you're going to have is an aggregate fruit, because we look at all of those carpals and call the total condition there, the fruit that's developing in that single flower, a type of aggregate fruit, because there's lots of small fruitlets. And if those little fruitlets are achenes, which means that the ovary has matured into a dry fruit that is indehiscent and contains just a single seed, then the term for that is an echinocetum. And that's basically what's happening here in the strawberry. And we'll look more closely at that in just a little bit. You can also have an aggregate of drupes or drupelets, tiny little drupes. That's what we have in a raspberry or a blackberry. That's called a drupacetum. You could have an aggregate of follicles, which are a dry fruit. And of course, drupes are a fleshy fruit. Follicles are a dry fruit. A follicle is a type of fruit that milkweeds have. You can have really small, tiny follicles, meaning that it's a dry fruit and it just splits open on one seam. And if you have a whole bunch of those again together, that's a follicetum. You can have fruits that are full-fledged drupes, like this peach over here. You can have fruits that are called pomes, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And the Rosa genus, of course, has some fruits that are called hips, which means that they are an accessory fruit. Well, the strawberry is an accessory fruit, and pomes are an accessory fruit. Accessory fruits mean that the fruit is formed from not just ovary tissue, which is, again, is what the definition of fruit is, the ovary tissue as it becomes mature, but also other tissues that surround the ovary. And in particular in the Rosaceae, what happens is the Hypantheum, especially when the Hypantheum is really tightly enclosing the pistil or the lower part of the pistil, which is the ovary, then quite often that Hypantheum is going to contribute to the fruit. Well, there's a Hypantheum now in blue. So originally, when I used to been teaching, field botany for a long time, I always taught students that the rose family had 4 main subfamilies. The rose subfamily, the plum subfamily, the apple subfamily, and the spirea subfamily. They have these fancy names here: Rosaceae, Prunus, Meadow, and Spirea. And this is a little table that still uses that idea, at least, of the 4 subfamilies. And this describes, again, characteristics for each of these 4 subfamilies. When you have a lot of species in a family, such as in the Rosaceae with 3,000 species, it really is helpful to break down that family into smaller, more sensible groups. And that's, of course, what a subfamily does. So it helps you make sense of it, helps to organize them, and again, find what are the main differences or characteristics that are important. So you can kind of go through this yourself. You can see, again, some of the various genera that are in the rose family, for example, the rose subfamily, Rosaceae. The Prunus is just Prunus. The apple includes Crataegus, and of course, Malus is the apple genus, and Silversberry and Malachiars. And then the Spirea subfamily is Spirea and Carpals. Those are the most common ones. I'm leaving a few out, of course, but and you can see here that stipules are pretty common. Ovary position, 3 of them have superior ovaries. And what that means is that it looks like this. The ovary sits above the place of attachment of the other flower parts, the stamens, the petals, and the sepals. You can see those three flower parts are attaching to the receptacle right down here, and the ovary is basically above that, so it's superior to it. An inferior ovary is one that looks like this, when the attachment of those, again, other flower parts, stamens, petals, and sepals, occurs at the top of the ovary. And so in this case, the ovary is inferior because it's below the attachment of those parts. This is the situation, again, in the apples. And a reason why, because we also have hypanthiums here, why the fruit of an apple is a pome. A pome is a type of accessory fruit where the tissue comes from mainly the hypanthium. That's what you eat mainly when you eat an apple. We can see that leaves compound in the rose subfamily, simple in the plum, both possibilities in the apple, both possibilities in the Spirea subfamily. Carpal number is another important one. So in the rose subfamily, there's many, many carpals and they're not fused. So here's a floral diagram. These are all called floral diagrams. They kind of show a nice sort of cross-sectional picture of what the family looks like in general. It's designed to show the basic features of each family. So first of all, this darker circle right here is a hypanthium. Then these little circles in here are carpals. So bunches of separate carpals. Here, this is a single carpal. As you see, carpal is one. A single carpal with showing that there's two ovules attached right there. This one is showing that there's 5 carpals, each with 2 ovules there, but 5 carpals that are fused together. That says 5 right here and more or less. Plus minus means more or less fused. So that means most of the carpals are fused together. Maybe sometimes a bit of the upper portion of the carpals are not fused together. So you might have styles that aren't fused together. And then this rectangle that goes through the gynecium here means that it's inferior. Then over here in the spirea, we have 2 to 5 carpals, but again, they're not fused. So again, you can see it makes sense now that over here, we're going to have aggregate fruits because the carpals are not fused, the ovaries are separate, and these happen to form follicles, so follicetums. And over here in the Rosa family, again, because they're not fused, we're going to have various types of aggregated fruits. Some of them are drupacetum, some of them are echinocetums, and some are follicetums. Okay, so that's how it's always been. But what's happened in the treatment in Flora, North America, there's been, of course, a lot of genetic work looking at the DNA of Rosaceae, and it was discovered that there was a problem, a big problem with this organization of Rosaceae in these 4 subfamilies. The subfamilies were not monophyletic. That means that they didn't fit the evolutionary tree like they're supposed to, I guess is a simple way of saying that. So they were reworked according to genetics and DNA into 3 subfamilies. These 3 right here, the Prunodia, Melodia, and Spirodia, all were combined. So as diverse as these all are here, they all ended up getting combined in the Amygdaloideae. Then a new subfamily, the Dryodoideae, appears. They came from some of the genera that were in the Rhozoideae. And what was discovered was that the mountain avens subfamily, as be the common name for it, Dryas is a genus that's mountain avens. This also includes mountain mahogany, circle carpus, and bitterbrush, Persia. There's 4 genera, there's 1 more genera. You can see that it's the smallest of the 3, but it comes out in part because all of the species in this subfamily are nitrogen fixing. They have the capability of fixing nitrogen in association with the bacteria Frankia. And they also are all united in the common aspect of having cyanogenic glycosides. So you can see this is just looking at the different numbers of tribes, genera, and species. The two main subfamilies, of course, are Rhozoidea and Amygdaloidea. They have about the same number of species, roughly worldwide, pretty close. So again, those two, of course, are the main ones. Any questions? All right, we're going to
define tribe.
Define tribe?
Yeah.
So a tribe is a level, let's see, it's a level below family. Wait, it's a level below subfamily, I think. It's just another taxonomic level in there. Yeah, it's a level below family, I believe, because we have 6 tribes, 26 genera. I'll have to look that up. I forget where it fits in there, but it's just another taxonomic level to help organize the species into groups. You know, the main ones, you know, family, genus, species, and above family would be order. I think if tribe comes between order and family, or between family and genus. I think it's between family and genus, but I'm gonna have to check on that. Okay, I think before we go to the key for genera, let's take a look at the other part of what I did for you and provided for you. This one looks like it. Oh, it's coming a little bit better. So this is just the PowerPoint here, which we're going to take a look at in a little bit. These tables, or this table, there's just one table. So again, if you've been coming to these workshops, I try to put together a table. Anytime we're doing an idea of a group, I put together a table. This one does not include all 70 species, of course. It would be a huge job to do that. What I tried to do, again, is just focus on the some of the genera that are more common and more frequent, and species then that are going to be more likely to be encountered. And this mainly just includes some herbaceous species and then some of the Rosa species. So what this table does, again, if you haven't seen this before, there's 5 columns here. This column here is just going to tell you what the correct name is according to Flora of North America. And since Rosaceae, of course, has been done by Flora of North America, we know what those names are. And that was a fairly recent treatment. It just came out not that long ago. Also put the status in Iowa, what its status is in terms of whether it's native. And most of these are going to be native because I mainly just focus on native species. Again, trying to whittle down the number here to a manageable level. I usually don't deal with the non-native species. Iowa coefficient of conservatism, and then the confidence in that number is what the H means. Medium, high, or low is the confidence level. And the number ranges from 1 to 10. That's sort of a measure of what the that species affinity is. I think that's a good way to say it. What that species affinity is for really high, natural, pristine, the best of our ecosystems, the best natural ecosystems that we have left. What the affinity for those systems is. In a sense, it's a sort of a measure of how a species does with respect to human disturbance. If the number is really high, and that species doesn't do very well with human disturbance, that's why it needs to have really natural, pristine types of sites. If the number is low, like a 3, which is relatively low, there's a few 2s in here, then that's the species that pretty much likes human disturbance, or at least is somewhat at an advantage because human disturbances seem to help it. So that's coefficients of conservatism are a way of trying to get a handle on the quality of an ecosystem. Eilers and Rosa, 1994, which again is badly out of date, the nomenclature in there. So this is our only published plant list, and so we use that just as a matter of course there because it's the only published list that we have. Common names also listed there. Habitat, the known counties in Iowa where there's at least some kind of voucher, probably at least a herbarium voucher. So this kind of shows the distribution of the species in Iowa. Now, of course, we can't expect every single county to have a voucher because it's likely that no one has really done any collecting, perhaps in some of these counties to any great extent. And so when you see a distribution like this pretty much means to me that this is something, tall agrimony, that occurs pretty much statewide. Something like this one clearly does not occur statewide. That's why I put this red line in here. It looks like it's definitely a southeastern Iowa species. We don't see any evidence that it crosses the line much. There is one location right here, but sometimes bone app, and this right here is just basically what you see right here. I just made it bigger and easier to see. We know that bone app, which is the online source of looking at species distributions, is not always correct. And when you see some discrepancies like this, that probably is some kind of record that is in error. Now, to understand bone app, you just have to understand that if a state's green, median green, that means that the species does occur in that state. That's why the state is green, but the distribution is shown at the county level. So the light green are places in a state, in a specific county where there's a voucher. And if it's light green again, that means it's native. If it's yellow, that means it's considered to be rare. So a lot of good information here, a little bit of ecology about these species, again, distributions, so that you, again, if you're planning to do any planting and would want to consider, using some species, you've got some good information here, at least as best as we can, to try to understand what the distribution is in the state. Agrimonia there's 4 species in Iowa. One of them is non-native. Again, just have the 4 native species here. They're all pretty much forest or woodland species. I do see striata sometimes out on prairies. Then one of our endangered Rosaceae Filipendula rubra, you can see that there's really only one population that's reliable as far as a native population, that one right there. These 2 populations clearly were most likely the result of an introduction. Filipendula rubra, Queen of the Prairie, is a popular ornamental, and so it gets planted. It has been planted. I mean, there's other places where it grows, or where it's found, of course, but those are all because of planting. A couple of strawberry species. We're going to key those out. Then quite a few geums. There's 5 native geum species or aven species in Iowa. Lepicum, canadense, Luciniatum. It's one of the prairie species, triform. That was the one that was pictured on the front there. Prairie smoke. Prairie smoke, for example. If you were going to do a restoration and wanted to put some prairie smoke in, that's fine if you're someplace up in here. But if you're below this line, you better not be planting any prairie smoke. Vernon, which is a listed species, but it's going to be delisted because there are a lot of populations for it. 64 known post-1980 populations, which is way above the threshold of 40 to qualify for special concern. It too is a more of an eastern Iowa species. Potentilla, so there's 10 potentillas. As far as Iowa goes, rubus is the most speciose as far as the Rosaceae. There's probably about 38 known species of rubus, blackberry, dewberry, raspberry. But second would be potentillas, the cinquefoils, and hawthorns, crataegus. There probably could be more crataegus because that's another difficult one. There are some difficult ones here, and rubus and crataegus and even Amelanchier are 3 genera that are pretty difficult to deal with when it comes to trying to figure out what you've got. But potentilla also has 4 species on the threatened and endangered list. This one right here is one that's found in fens and peatlands. Silverweed. It also has there's also 5 potentillas that have had name changes. So this one here, of course, Potentilla arguta, we always used to call it by that. That was the taller prairie cinquefoil. That's now Dramocalis arguta, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. A couple more right here. This one was changed to Dasyphora, and this one here was changed to Comarum. And then this one here was changed to Tridentata. And some of the ones that have been changed are the ones that are threatened and endangered species. And of course, you can see that many of them occur just in really small parts of the state. And that's why they're in part rare. Okay, then some wild roses, Rosa. This one is an endangered species up in northeast Iowa, Acicularis. It's a special concern. Then we've got 3 of our prairie roses, Arkansana, Blanda, and Carolina. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. Clustris is listed in Islands and Rosa, but it's not really native. It's the only known location is in Taylor County at the state park down there. Now it's been determined that was most clearly an introduction. You can see over here that it's really an eastern North America species. There are a couple other locations in Iowa and Bonap, but those again are in error. Bonap is not always correct. And then the climbing prairie rose, Southern Iowa species. Tigra, I had a picture of that one on the front slide. And then this is a list of species, special concern species, only occurs in Western Iowa. We will talk about it and look at how you can identify it. So that's a quick overview of this table. Let's go ahead and take a little break, take about a 4-minute break or so. When we come back, then we'll go ahead and take a look at the keys. All right, be back in just a few minutes. Okay, let's get started again. So a little bit different from other workshops, I put a key in to the main genera in Rosaceae to help you get to the genus. I thought that would be helpful because if you get to the genus, you're half done for the most part. And it is a big family. It's pretty diverse. Again, part of the diversity comes from the fact that it's been around since the Middle Eocene or so. Records go back that far, which is about 45 million years ago. So a long time. All right, so let's take a look at this key. It starts out looking at the leaves, whether they're simple or compound. That's what 1A and 1B are showing right here. And what we're going to work with are on this slide here are the simple leaves. So leaves simple, then we're going to look at that gynoecium and decide if it's got just one pistil. It could be a simple one or a compound one, doesn't matter, but just one. Excuse me. Or does it have two or more separate pistils, which again means that it's going to have excuse me, an aggregate fruit. So that's the main division right here. And of course, 2B brings us out to Physocarpus and Spirea. That's the short one. The long one with the one pistil is all in through here. So Prunus comes out right away because Prunus, and here's a picture of it. Oh, shoot, that's supposed to be, that's not supposed to be there right now. I didn't get that in there quite right. Anyway, here's Prunus. Again, it shows that there's just a simple, single pistil here. It's a simple one too. Ovary is superior. All the plums and cherries have a drupe or a fruit. So again, you need to be able to look at the flower to see this. The other option here, of course, is then that the pistil is compound. Now, again, there's only one pistil here, but the question is whether the pistil is simple, meaning it has just one carpal and one style, or is that single pistil a compound one, meaning that is fused from 2 to 5 carpals. And that's what we're saying here. So when there are 2 to 5 carpals, and the ovary is also inferior here. So the two things are different. The ovary is inferior here and superior here. This is going to lead to 3 genera: the Amelanchiars, the Serviceberries, Crataegus, and apples, or the wild prairie apple. All right, so what separates Serviceberries out is this first part right here, the flowers, and then of course, consequently the fruits, which can persist for quite a while, are going to be in a raceme. And a raceme is a type of flower structure in which there's a central axis, and the flowers are all attached to that central axis by a short little flower stem called a pedicel. And when the flower again matures into a fruit, then the fruit is attached to that single central stem. In the case down here for Crataegus and apples, the flowers and fruits are often just solitary, or they're in some kind of more complicated cluster. Clearly not in a raceme, which is pretty easy to see. Also, we can see that there's a difference sort of in the petals here. Sorry, I didn't, I should have gotten that, wish that was out of the way, because there's some petals right here on a serviceberry. There is some, the petals in Amelanchier are usually fairly narrow compared to the petals down here, which are more broadly elliptic or even more round. Okay, so that helps us get Amelanchier out of the way. And now we've got just Crataegus and Malus. Again, in terms of the native species, there's lots of, well, there's at least 10 native hawthorns, and there's the prairie crab apple, which is Malus ioensis. This is a little bit harder to separate. What we see here is that the fruit, both of these are going to be a pome. Well, all 3 of these are pomes, but these are pomes, which mean, again, that the fleshy part of the fruit is coming from the Hypantheum. But remember, there's multiple carpals here. There's 2 to 5 carpals, and they're fused together to make a compound pistil. And the carpal walls, then, the carpals fused together, walls fused to walls. The carpal walls become hard and bony in this scenario here. What that means is that pome then actually has each of those carpals had an ovary, and in that ovary there's a seed that forms. but because of that, the carpal wall is getting hard and bony. It's like the pome is composed of 2 to 5 little nutlets. In this picture here, this is a crabapple fruit here, a pome. And in this case, there's one of those nutlets is right here. The technical name for those is pyrene. It's kind of like, it's a little bit like a drupe in that this is really hard. Those carpal walls are really hard, like a nut. And that's why a nutlet is another term that's sometimes used. So the difference here is that the fruits of Crataegus are going to have the seeds encased in a really tough tissue, like a little nut. And those nuts are embedded in the fleshiness, the Hypantheum that has formed this fruit. In malice, that's not the case. And you see carpal walls are not that hard and bony. They're more soft and papery or leathery. And so again, the seeds are much more exposed there. The seeds are not exposed here because the seeds are actually down inside of this hard structure. Here's a couple of leaves showing how to separate Phascocarpus and Spirea. Basically, you can separate on stipules and Phascocarpus and more lobed leaves, and Spirea much more elliptic and without stipules. Estipulic means that there's no stipules. Okay. So, let me go back here just a second to see where we're coming from. So we're at 6A and 6B here. So now we're going to, we're still talking about, again, now we're going to be doing leaves compound. I can't see the top of my screen. Yeah, now we're going to be doing leaves compound. And that includes some shrubs and some climbing woody vines and also some herbs. So starting with leaves compound, we're going to separate them out whether they're shrubs or whether they're herbs. And the shrubs up here also tend to have prickles associated with those stems, and the herbs down here do not. So let's do the shrubs. That's going to just separate roses and rubus, the two woody shrubs that are, again, so common. So here we're going to just separate the roses. Here's a cross section of a rose on the basis of the Hypenthium. Hypantheum and Rosa are always like this. They're fairly large, kind of like a spherical globe, and they enclose all of the simple pistils. These have simple pistils, all enclosing it. Here's a whole bunch of simple pistils down and through here. And they're all kind of tightly packed into this cup space down and through here. The leaves in the roses are going to be pinnately compound. So that separates them from the rubus, the blackberries and raspberries, because here the Hypantheum is much more shallow, a more flat type of structure. The pistils are easily exposed. You can easily see them. And when they mature, the ovaries and those pistils mature into a fruit again. What happens is each of those matures into a little tiny drupe or druplet. And so again, we have a drupacetum. The real, again, everyone knows what raspberry and blackberry fruits look like. And again, this is a rose hip, the accessory fruit formed by the achenes. These are achenes in here, but also the fruit is formed from this Hypanthium tissue. So that separates roses and rubus. Now the herbaceous ones that don't have any prickles, we're going to separate those on the basis of their, whether they're once compound, that's 9A, or 9B over here is palmately compound or trifoliate, meaning that there's just 3 leaflets. So either palmately, which is 5 or more leaflets, or 3 leaflets, versus pinnately compound over here, which looks like this filipendula leaf here. So the ones that are pinnately compound, here's where Agrimonia comes off. There's just 2 pistils in each of those flowers, but one of those ovaries is going to abort. So you end up really just getting a single seed in these fruits. Hypantheum is very persistent though, and is a part of the fruit. This is the Hypantheum and fruit of Agrimonia, and it's really distinct because the Hypantheum has these hooked bristles out along the rim of it. Hooked bristles. The alternative to this one is the pistils 5 to numerous, and the fruit's not hidden by the Hypantheum. The Hypantheum may be glabrous or may be hairy, but it does not have hooked bristles. So again, the number of pistils and those bristles are a key thing that separates these two right here. And there's 5 species of Agrimonia, 4 of them are native. And we'll take a look at those in a little bit. We're continuing with the 5 to numerous pistils, and we're going to bring off GM, the avens, by the fact that the styles in each of these pistils is jointed, meaning that it has sort of a break point near the middle or upper portion of the style. The apical portion breaks off at that joint, so it's just is lost, it's gone. The portion of the style that's left, that basal portion stays, it's persistent, it elongates a little bit and forms a hook at the tip. That's what's happening over here. These are the styles after the tip has broken off and the more distal part has broken off, and the remaining part, that portion, the tip of it, forms a little bit of a hook. These have sort of these hook-like structures associated with the fruits, but these are coming from the styles. And these hooks are coming from the Hypantheum. All right, so that brings off GM. Now, if the styles are not jointed, such as is saying here, and those styles just basically wither after flowering, or if they do stay and are somewhat persistent, they don't have a hook at the tip, then we're going to go to this direction, and we're going to bring off Filipendula, Queen of the Prairie, very simply by just looking at these gigantic leaves. This is one big leaf. Filipendula ruba has leaves that are up to 2 feet long, and it has it's pinnately compound because it has these leaflets here and here. In fact, these leaflets are sessile, but the terminal leaflet up here, the leaflet at the very end, is gigantic. And the terminal leaflet can be 5 to 9 palmately lobed. So this leaf is just, there's no mistaking it. The alternative is the terminal leaflet unlobed, or maybe just 3-lobed, or pinnately lobed, but not lobed and not nearly as large as this. There's a difference in the number of pistils. The pistils could be many, many more down here. So that's going to take us to the next one here, which is 13, A and B. And here's where Agrimonia comes off of Potentilla. So the style is attached to the ovary near its base. That's the substance for separating Potentilla arguta out and changing it to the genus Agrimonia, is that the style is attached to the ovary near its base. Whereas in Potentilla, the styles are attached kind of at the normal place at the top of the ovary. The ovary just kind of continues as the style. But in Agrimonia, that doesn't happen. The style comes off lower near the base, which is kind of odd. Also, the Agrimonia, the corollas are usually white to cream color. Ochroleukis means cream color, where most Potentilla are pretty bright yellow. Now, there is one Potentilla, Potentilla recta, which is a non-native Potentilla cinquefoil, that has Ochroleukis petals, so it looks a little bit more like this. So, but it has 5 leaflets, palmately compound, 5 to 7 palmately compound leaflets, and Drymocallis has pinnately compound leaves. Okay, so that gets us through that first group that had pinnately compound. Now the ones that have palmately compound or trifoliate leaves. Here we see that GM comes out again because you could go both ways with GM. And so we have that same characteristic we had before. So we don't really need to go over it. We just use it again because sometimes you might have a GM that has palmately compound or trifoliate leaves, and other times you'll have one that keys out with 9A. So we get rid of GM there. Then we're going to go to the, look at these Epicalyx bracts. So here is a good picture of an Epicalyx, these bracts right here. Here's the sepal. That's the sepal, that's the sepal. But there's also 5 bracts right here that are actually much larger than the sepals. And you see, that's what this character is saying. Epicalyx bracts wider than the sepals, prominently 3-toothed or lobe. You can see 3 teeth and 3 lobes right here. That gives you Duchesnea, which is a non-native species, but I did include it here because I wanted to again show you what these look like. Duchesnea is actually not in Eilers and Rosa because when Eilers and Rosa came out, it wasn't known, I guess, at that time. But it is, it's not uncommon, but there are certainly enough populations. It looks a lot like a strawberry. And you see that that's what's going to kind of key out here with the rest of it here is that if the Epicalyx bracts are similar to the sepals, and that's what we see right here. Here's sepals, and then in between these 2 sepals is an Epicalyx bract right here. But they are a little bit smaller or similar in size to the sepals. That's what this is saying. Sometimes those bracts could be maybe 2-lobed, but entire is the other option here, and that's what we see here. When we go with that one, corollars can be white, cream color, or yellow. Then we're going to come out to these 2 options here. And one is going to be wild strawberry, Fergaria. Of course, we're going to say the corollars are white for that one, and we're going to use this fruit here because for strawberries have this unique fruit. Again, we can see here, it's an echinocetum, but what I'm saying here is what happens is it's an aggregate fruit and an accessory fruit. The receptacle, which is the tissue that we see kind of right in here, that all of the flower parts are attached to, the sepals and petals and carpals and stamens are attached to the receptacle. That receptacle tissue enlarges, greatly enlarges, and that becomes the flesh of the strawberry. And in the process of doing that, the carpals, which were again sitting on the other side of this flower here, the carpals, which again have the ovaries become the fruits. The fruits are tiny little achenes, single-seeded dry fruits. They get embedded in the receptacle tissue. So there we can see lots and lots of achenes. That's why it's called an aggregated with achenes. That's why it's called an echinocetum. It's also an echinocetum that is an accessory fruit as well because of the receptacle tissue. All right, so, and here the leaves are always basal in Fergaria, wild strawberry, and in Potentilla, there's usually at least some calling leaves. There will be basal leaves, but there's leaves that come off of a stem too. That's what calling means. And here in Potentilla, the receptacle only slightly becomes larger. It doesn't do anything like this. You can't even really see the receptacle. It's not really visible under the echinocetum. The echinocetum covers it all. Here, the echinocetum doesn't cover it, of course, because we can see all that red tissue. Okay, so now we can key out some of the groups here. So I'm going to do Agrimonia here first. And we have here 4 native species. That's the only one I'm going to deal with. The non-native one, Agrimonia eupatoria, I've never even seen, so I don't think it's very common. So one Agrimonia comes off real easily, Agrimonia parviflora. It comes off real easily because it has many, many leaflets, 13 to 17 leaflets in those pinnately compound leaves. And that's excluding these tiny little ones called the intermediate ones that occur, are smaller and occur between the larger ones. So that's an easy one. If you know you've got an Agrimonia, Agrimonia parviflora is pretty easy. The other three then have just 5 to 9 leaflets, slightly different shape, but not that much different. Now we're going to separate them out by looking at the axis of the inflorescence. Here's some flowers of parviflora, but separate them out on the axis of the inflorescence. Gripposepula is going to have an axis that's very glandular. And this picture here shows it. You can see some hairs, which again are fairly long, more than 1 millimeter long. And then really small, here's a blow up of it right here, little stiputate glandular hairs, a little base and then a gland. And again, with a hand lens or a dissecting scope, you can easily see that. So that's going to separate it out from the other two, because the other two are right down here, axis without glands. But it can have a lot of hairs, but again, it doesn't have the glands. The other two then, pubescens and striata, separate on the basis of what you see right here, looking at the ventral surface of the leaflets. Now, this picture here shows Gripposepula, again, the axis of the inflorescence here, and then this shows some glandular hairs on the bottom side of the leaflet. So Gripposepula has glandular hairs on the axis, has glandular hairs on the bottom side of the leaf. Abaxial means the bottom side of the leaf. So it's similar to striata. Here we see that pubescens, which is probably one of the more common ones, the ventral surface of the leaflets does not have glands. Eglandular means no glands. It is kind of pubescent with hairs, kind of dense, pretty soft to the touch. Soft Agrimonia is one of its names. There's a difference in the stipules, and it's easy just to show you that. But striata, again, of course, then the bottom surface of the leaflets does have glands. And you'll see that here on this next picture. Thanks to the website, Minnesota Wildflowers, you got some really good pictures here to compare, first of all three of these species that have the 5 to 7 leaflets. We can compare their upper stems here in these pictures. And here again is, this shows pubescence, it shows that the plant basically looks like, and then it's Hypenthium right here. I'm pointing that out because the grooves on the Hypanthium right here have some oppressed hairs. But again, here's the difference in the bottom side of those two leaves. This is pubescence and this is striata. Here you can see all those little glands, all those little clear dots. Those are glands. And the pubescence is mainly on the veins. Over here in pubescence, the pubescence is more widespread all throughout the leaf. Now, if you have these three species vegetatively, you can use the leaves to some extent here, although again, this leaf and the leaf of Gripposepula are somewhat alike, but you can use the stipules. The stipules in Gripposepula are about as wide as they are long and have lots and lots of lobes on the anterior margin. Pubescens has a stipule that is more long than it is wide. And it too has quite a few teeth along the margin. So it's just a matter of sort of length to width ratio between these two. And then striata has the stipules that does not have any teeth along this more distal portion right here, the distal half of it. Just has some teeth down here. This is does not have any teeth along it. So you can use that to help you. How about the two strawberries? Real simple. Vesca and Virginiana, separate them basically by looking at the leaves. You don't need anything but the leaves. And again, so strawberry has trifoliate leaves, 3 leaflets in the compound leaf. What you want to look at is the terminal lobe or tooth. These are really teeth, not lobes. So excuse me, I should say teeth. The terminal tooth on Vesca is as big as or somewhat bigger than the 2 teeth that it sits that sit on either side of it. But in Virginiana, that tooth is smaller than the two teeth on either side. You can kind of see that there, and you can kind of see it right here as well. Then I just put a picture in of Queen of the Prairie just to show you it is a very beautiful plant. You can certainly see why it's desired as an ornamental species. And then we're going to go on to, well, there's a strawberry flower. Now we're going to look at the gems. And this is going to separate out 5 gems for you here. The first one's real easy. We're going to separate out prairie smoke because it is so distinctly unique from the others. It has stem leaves that are opposite, whereas all the rest of the gems have stem leaves that are alternate. Now, gems also have basal leaves. And again, that's the case in all of these. They have basal leaves. You do need to have a plant that is out of that basal leaf stage and has a stem and has leaves on the stem in order to, of course, see this. But the other thing that's really easy is that, of course, prairie smoke has these styles get very somewhat long. They elongate to 3 to 5 centimeters in length, and of course are used in dispersal of the fruits. And that means that, again, that the styles in prairie smoke are not jointed. And the more distal portion, the part furthest away from the base, does not break off. That's what a joint does. A joint, again, is a place where the style can break. That doesn't happen because the styles get real long. All the rest of them, the other 4, do break. Those styles are jointed, and the more distal portion does break off. That basal portion stays back or stays persistent and develops these hooks, again, that we talked about. So all 4 of those species do that. Now, the next one that comes off is GM Vernon, and it comes off really easily. It's an easy one, again, if you have the fruiting heads, because the mature fruits, as we see right here, are stiputate. It means that they are elevated a little bit on a stipe so that the fruits are separated from the calyx that sits below it. And that's what's happening here. Here's the head. Here's that short little stipe that you see provides some space in here between the fruits up here and Achenestitum, because these are achenes, an aggregate of achenes, and the calyx, basically what you see down here. So that's real easy to separate out. Here's a colline leaf, a leaf on the stem of GM Vernum. So that one comes off. All the rest, the other 3 here, do not have that stipe in there. The mature fruits are sessile on the calyx. Also, there's a lot more achenes in these 3 than up here. So these 3 then, what we have left, we're going to separate 2 of them off here on the basis of the receptacle. So in order to see this, you actually have to have, again, the flower or the fruiting structure. And you have to, if you have the fruiting structure, you have to pull the achenes off, or you have to pull the carpals off if you have the flower, so you can see the receptacle. The receptacle is a tissue that these things are attached to. And what we're saying here is if you get down there and look at that receptacle, in these 2, it's going to be pubescent. There's going to be hairs on that receptacle. Both of these have a stem that's somewhat pubescent. We can kind of, well, we can't see that here, but it's not pilose, which is a different kind of pubescence. It's where the hairs are longer. The one that comes off is Luciniatum on the basis of its receptacle is glabrous, or at least nearly so. Again, you pull off those fruits or pull off those carpals and look at that receptacle, and there won't be hardly any hairs there. Luciniatum also has corollas that are white. Alepicum has corollas that are yellow, and Canadense has corollas that are white. But knowing that this one has white flowers does help. So these 2 then are separated on the basis of the achene, the beak of the achene. You can also see, again, there's a difference in the corollas if you have the flowers. many keys, when they key GMs, they'll have a key for if you've got flowers, and they'll have a key if you've got fruits. And usually fruits are a little bit better in terms of having more characteristics to go on. But why not, often you can see both fruits and flowers. So we can see there's a difference in the number of achenes, a lot more, 150 or more here, a lot fewer here, less than 100. That's still a lot, of course. Difference in the flower color is important. The achenes have little beaks with a few long hairs here. And this here is the fruit of Elepicum, this one right here, of course. And it's a little bit hard to see, but if you blow this up, you can do that on your computer probably. You can see some little hairs in here. And those fine little hairs are the hairs that they're talking about here. The beak of the achene has a few long hairs at the base, whereas in Canadense, they do not. All right, so that takes care of GM. We're getting there. And here's just a bunch of pictures to help you again with those. The plants are all labeled here. All of these are GM Elepicum. All of these in the middle here are GM Canadense. And all of these are GM Luciniatum over here. And again, this one right here, the GM Canadense, you can see some hairs in here. And those are the hairs that are attached to the receptacle. Again, Canadense has a receptacle that has hairs on it. Okay, I think we are down to our last one, Rosa. And so we'll run through this one quick here. So I'm not doing all of them. I'm not, of course, doing the non-native ones. And there's 5 native ones, or just 6 native ones. I'm only going to do 5. I'm not doing Rosa sicularis. That's the one that's up in Northeast Iowa and grows on aldrific talus slopes. But the other 5 are all in here. And we're going to bring off the climbing prairie rose first. It comes off pretty nicely because on it, the flowers, which look just like any other typical rose, but the styles, again, remember you have lots and lots of carpals, and you have lots and lots of styles because each carpal has a style. Those styles are all fused into a column. And here you can see that shown right here. These are all stamens right here. All those are stamens. The styles are all kind of fused together into an elongate column type of structure. And that comes out of the mouth of the Hypanthium. Remember in Rosa, the Hypantheum is enlarged and kind of surrounds all of the basal portion of those carpals. Also, the leaves in Satigera usually just have 3 to 5 leaflets. And here's some of those leaves right here. Here's what the stipules look like on it, in case that's helpful. I thought maybe this coloration might be helpful, but some other roses have this too. But what I think might be helpful here is that the petiole right here, and even the stipules here, have a little bit, some ciliate hairs along the margin here. And this petiole has some little ciliate hairs coming off of it. The Hypantheum right here and the sepals have some glandular hairs on them. But again, it's mainly the number of leaflets, and if you have the flowers, the stylar column. Also, of course, that the fact that this one is climbing, it's going to have stems that are climbing up on other plants, and the other roses do not do that. They don't climb. Okay, so let's do the other 4 then. And we're going to pull off Rosa Arkansana next here. So again, this is saying again that, well, first of all, we're right here at this point. We're going to separate the 4 that are left here into 2 groups based on a really important characteristic. And it's this one here. Every key uses this to separate them. The main thing to kind of point out here is this thing right here. The pedicels of the flowers, those are the stems of the flowers, the hypanthea again. Here's the pedicel, here's the hypanthea. The sepals, there's the sepals, and the fruits, the hips. In 3 of these 3 right here, do not have stalked glands in general. mostly do not have stalk glands. 2B down here does. Sepals, let's see, here we go, pedicels, hypantheus, sepals, and hips with stalk glands. That dollar sign is my sign for sometimes. Sometimes those glands can be sparse, but they're usually there. And I use mostly with stalk glands here and mostly without stalk glands here because again, most of the time that's correct, but you can have problems with roses because they hybridize. And so it's not impossible to see one that, you know, has just a few, and it's going to be hard to say, well, is it, which way do I go? Do I go 2A or 2B? The other thing that you can use here is the sepals themselves are mostly persistent at fruiting up here for these three. And they basically, again, that means that they stay present on the fruits. And after flowering, those sepals tend to be somewhat erect, or at least going upwards. Ascending means going upwards after the flower is done and the fruit starts to form. And then the sepals will stay attached to those rose hips like we see right here. Those three do that. This one down here, Rosa Carolina, meadow rose, the sepals get shed, are going to be shed at fruiting. And even before fruiting, after flowering, those sepals are already reflexing. They're bending downwards. They're reflex pretty strongly after flowering. And then eventually they fall off. So if you're not sure about the stalk glands, the sepals can be a good backup. So that's how we separate off Rosa Carolina. Now we've got these three. And Rosa Arkansana and Rosa Blanda, of course, are two prairie species. Rosaceae is also a prairie species, but it's more in western part of Iowa. We're going to separate Arkansana off basically on the leaflets, mostly 7 to 9 up here and 5 to 7 in these two. Carolina also has 5 to 7 too. So all of these down through have 5 to 7. So that helps, but again, that's, you know, sometimes, you know, you can't quite be sure. If you have 7, you know, then you don't know for sure. Another thing, if you got the flowers, then Arkansana is going to have the flowers at the tips of the current year's growth. The new growth that has come off of the tip, has come from a bud. The new growth that has occurred is going to be greenish, twiggy kind of growth. Flowers come off at the tips of that new growth, and there can also be some flowers coming off of some side branches that are coming from the previous year's growth. It's now a second-year-old stem. So think of that, and then contrast that with Blanda and Woodsiae, in which there's flowers only come off of that second-year growth. There are never any flowers that are coming off of the current year's growth. It's a little bit hard to figure that out, but that is another good, pretty reliable way to separate Arkansana from these two. And then in these two, we're going to separate on the basis of prickles, basically. Blanda, a smooth wild rose, is a common name for that one. Prickles mainly toward just the base. In the lower part, when you do have the prickles, they're pretty slender. Some of the new growth, again, upper part, doesn't have any prickles at all. It's very smooth looking. Woodsiae is going to have prickles that are more evenly present all the way up and down the plant in theory. And you'll have a mixture of some that are really stout and thick based and some that are more slender. I've got a couple of good pictures here to show you how to deal with those. So here's some pictures of Arkansana, usually lots and lots of prickles on most of the stem on it. Here's a leaflet with 9 leaflets. Again, 9 leaflets, pretty sure, you can be pretty sure if you got 9 leaflets and you got lots of prickles, that Arkansana is your rose. Blanda here, again, 5 leaflets to 7 leaflets. It can have prickles, especially on the lower part, but they're pretty slender looking. And I did find a picture here. It's not the best because I had to blow it up. But again, remember that Arkansana and Blanda and Woodsiae all have Hypenthium and pedicel and sepals that don't have what you see over here. Rosa Carolina has all of these stalked little glands, these stalked glands, and it's usually lots of them on the sepals here, lots of them on the Hypanthium, not so many on the pedicels, but when you see this many stalked glands, then Rosa Carolina. You don't see any of that right here, which again is going to be Arkansana, Blanda, or Woodsiae. Problem again is that can be something that is somewhere in between. It's not always this clear. Carolina usually has 7 leaflets shown here, and here's Woodsiae, usually has 5 to 7. But look at here. So on Woodsiae, what you often have is, again, really stout prickles right at the nose. Remember we said that there's more of a variety of some slender, thin prickles, and then some that are really stout. The really stout ones are right at the nose. And then in the internodes, they're more slender. And this is a rose I've never found yet because it's a special concern species. It's supposed to be in the Lost Hills, so I'm going to be keeping my eyes out for it next summer when I'm working out there. But here is the stipules, and this is hard to see, but the stipules here, well, like in all roses, the stipules are fused together. That's true for all of them. You can see that up here on that one. You can see it right there. You can even see it back there on that one. The stipules are fused together. But what I'm pointing to is the margin of these stipules here. There's supposedly some short little glandular tips. There's little teeth on these margins of these stipules. And the teeth, it's hard to see on this picture. You have to blow it up a little bit, but those teeth have little glands, little round spherical glands. That could be a really good characteristic to pin down Rosa Woodsiae. And that's it. So thanks for hanging in there. We got a little bit over, but I'm glad I didn't try and do any more. That was more than enough. Any questions?
We have one in the chat. Someone asking if you have introductory botany books that you would recommend.
Introductory botany books. Yeah, sure. I've taught introductory botany many times. I would say, submit here, one of the best, although some might say that it's a little bit too much, but I know that Iowa State uses this, is Raven's Biology of Plants. Now this is probably more than certainly one semester's worth, but it's good to have a little bit more than you need, I suppose. You can be picky and choosy if you're teaching, then of course. There are some other books I've used that are thinner, don't cover as much. I've got about 5 or 6 of them at least. Let's see if I've got another one here. Yeah, another one right here. This one's only probably about half the size of Raven. This is one by Linda Graham, James Graham, and Lee Wilcox, Plant Biology. I like that one too. There's certainly a lot to choose from, but those are the 2 that I generally use. Well, if that's it, next week we are looking at thistles, right?
Yep.
And I'm going to do native and non-native thistles next week because there's only about 7 native ones. So we're going to look at the non-native ones. It'll be a little bit more, again, trying to deal with, figuring out how to separate the non-natives from the natives. Well, thanks for coming out this afternoon, or this evening, I mean, and hope helps a little bit in your work with roses. Bye.
Thanks, Tom.